You think you understand patients until you become one. What if the most powerful medical education comes not from textbooks, but from a hospital bed? Dr. Peter Crane is a board-certified family physician practicing in beautiful rural Idaho since 2011, when he was hired to replace the same physician who delivered him. In 2022, at age 43, he was diagnosed with a 28-centimeter tumor that required radiation, surgery, and a lengthy rehabilitation process. We discuss what he's learned from that and applied to both his patient care and his perspective on life. He started a podcast called Doctors Making a Difference. He's a member of the Doctor Podcast Network. He helps other doctors find joy in the work they do, amplify their impact, and provide tools to help them succeed. But first, a word from our sponsors. Hey, this is Brad Block, host of The Physician's Guide to Doctoring. This is a personal and professional development podcast for physicians where we have experts on the show that try to teach us everything we should have been learning while we were memorizing Krebs cycle. Doctors change lives every day, but what happens when life changes yours? A single injury, a sudden illness, your career, your income, your future can shift in an instant. The best physicians don't just plan for success, they protect it. At Set for Life Insurance, they believe financial security isn't a luxury, it's a necessity. True own occupation disability insurance ensures that no matter what happens, your future stays in your hands. Because protecting your income means protecting everything you've built. Visit drpodcastnetwork.co/setforlife today. Secure your future before life makes that choice for you. Dr. Peter Crane, thanks so much for being on the podcast.
Glad to be here, Brad. Thanks for inviting me.
So you've been very open. You've been very public about your cancer journey. And I want to thank you for that. It's got to be a challenging thing to discuss. So can you bring the listeners up to speed? Tell us that story.
I don't think anybody wakes up hoping one day they have cancer, but it's been a journey. The way it shook out is I had been on a trip to Europe and I came back and I was laying there in bed, jet lagged and wide awake at 4 o'clock in the morning. And I just had my hand on my stomach and I was like, what is that? It was the left side of my abdomen. I'd felt fine. I guess I'd had a little bit of swelling in my leg and I'd lost about 10 pounds, but I'd been running, didn't really think anything of it. But that's about it. I felt fine, perfectly fine otherwise. So I thought maybe my spleen's enlarged, maybe something's going on. So I made an appointment with my practice partner, had him look at it, order a CT scan. And unfortunately, it was a big 28-centimeter tumor, just a shocker. One day you're fine, and the next day you have cancer. It was just mind-boggling. I was 43 years old.
How did you get that information? Because it was your partner that ordered the scan, and I would imagine you didn't get it in like the traditional manner that we give it to patients.
No. So I was scheduled to work in the ER that night because it was the day after I found it and they'd got the scan authorized and ordered. And I was just doing an ER shift. And so I was on the PAC system pulling up radiology for somebody else. And lo and behold, there was mine. And insatiable curiosity, I clicked on it thinking, oh, maybe it's just a spleen or something.
Yeah.
And the radiologist that interpreted it said 28-centimeter retroperitoneal sarcoma, likely sarcoma, and just all the things that you put on a report like that. And yeah, it's hard, Brad. It's like you get punched in the gut.
Yeah.
Wow. And my wife wasn't there. I just out of the blue. And then I had 3 or 4 patients waiting for me in the ER. So I had to just tuck that away.
Oh, God.
And go out and be a doctor. And it was almost surreal. Hard to believe that could even be reality. Like maybe I read it wrong. I went back later and read it again. Did I read that wrong? Could that possibly be it? But it was just so crazy to suddenly you can't take that moment back where you're like, no cancer to suddenly you have a tumor.
And it changes you.
There wasn't much of a prelude to that. Just suddenly there it was.
Yeah. Wow. It's interesting. I'm noticing some common threads I interviewed Aileen Gregosian, who is an emergency medicine physician, did her fellowship in critical care, and she had a heart transplant while she was a resident. And there's some common threads here. One is leading up to her heart failure, she was running and noticing that she was more fatigued. So I can't help but notice that the two of you share this common hobby of running. Maybe we should not be advocating running so much. Maybe that has something to do with it.
No, running is good. I'll have to connect with her sometime. It'd be interesting to share experiences. But yeah, it was a crazy day. It's almost like something you read about, but when it's you and it's yours, it's just wild because we deliver unfortunate news to people all the time as doctors. Get used to it. And it's easy to say, okay, that's the patient, I'm the doctor. But suddenly it was just right there in my face.
So the other thing that I noticed between the two of you is that like she was applying for fellowship, she had her fellowship spot. And from her ICU bed, she was like emailing the fellowship director to make sure that they kept her spot because she was about to get a heart transplant. And you just read the scan of this devastating diagnosis, and then you had to go see 4 patients in the emergency room. So both of you
I worked all night,
unable to step away from your position after this awful thing happened. You had to keep trudging through and see people. It's just remarkable what society asked of you
and
in
it's
that
just
setting.
the reality. I shouldn't have looked, I guess, if I didn't want to be told news at that time.
Oh.
But how do you not look? It's
No.
right there. It just popped up on the PAC system. Oh, I wonder what that one showed. But anyway, quite a moment.
And so what happened next?
So I told my wife briefly just over the phone when I had a break, hey, got some bad news. Like, how do you break that to her? It wasn't until sometime the next day when I got home that we actually got to sit and talk about it. And I really just had to tuck it in and just work. I probably could have reached out to some of my colleagues and been, come take my shift, but I work in a rural area. There's only so many of us. And honestly, this is a weird sensation, Brad. I felt almost like guilty about it. Like, I was not supposed to get sick. I'm the doctor. I've done all these things. It was weird. Like, why do I feel guilt? I shouldn't feel bad. I should feel like sad and sorrow and just, I should feel something akin to a patient, but I was like, oh, but I've got to go to work tomorrow, but I've got to do this. And you just get so used to like patients are counting on me. I can't step back and take care of me. Not that we don't do that, but in the moment, those are the thoughts that went to my, and I didn't want anybody to know. I was like, okay, I've just got to keep this down low because it just felt such an intrusion to my sense of self. I don't know. I don't think of myself like as a really prideful person, but at that moment, I was like, I just wanted to keep that really quiet and not say anything. And I don't know. It's just odd.
You ever think about why that might have been the case?
I think I don't know that I have the answer perfectly, but I think as I've went through it, the experience of being a doctor, especially in a small town, you're always there doing that. You're always helping people with their needs, and et cetera. And maybe it was just this change in how I saw myself. I don't know, but like sometimes my patients, when I tell them they have a bad diagnosis, it's on social media and they're doing fundraisers and everybody around them is rallying together. And I just wanted to keep it quiet. Maybe that's just my own personality.
Yeah.
But I have to believe that my profession drove some of that sentiment. Like I say, as I reflect on that time, and it's interesting to consider how I felt at that time. I wanted every answer under the sun right then, but I also needed to still continue work as a doctor. And I didn't want every conversation with patients to center around me. I really wanted to still be able to take care of patients and not have it come back to me with every discussion.
I think that's, from the way you're describing it, that has to have something to do with it, right? That like you see so many patients every day and you want it to still be about them, not about you.
Yeah, I would say that even today, that's the case. I have some patients I've known for years, and they will come in and they'll ask how I'm doing, and I'll give them a little bit of an answer. But I really, when they're coming to see me, I want to focus on them and their problem at that time. And it's okay to make cordial conversation, but I don't want every conversation to center around, how's my doctor doing? Is he okay today or not? And I appreciate the courtesy, but it's a little bit challenging. If you only have 20 minutes and you take up 10 minutes talking about me, I can't spend very much time taking care of your issues.
And there are plenty of doctors that do that, but often they're talking about their cars and their vacations. So they're talking about themselves. So then just tell us what the treatment was in your particular situation. What did you end up going through?
The first 2 weeks were agonizing. It's one, because you want answers, right? Is this actually sarcoma? Am I going to die? Is this metastatic? How far is this going to go, et cetera? And one of the benefits I would say we have as physicians, the surgeon I saw eventually told me this. She said, it's the one perk you have as a doctor. Take it. When you can get your biopsy a little bit faster, or I can phone a friend and be like, help me out. Because there's lots of tricky parts about being a doctor, but that is one of the benefits. So I was able to get in by the next week and have interventional radiologist, a friend of mine, do the biopsy, and we were able to get a pathologist to look at it. So it took about 12 days to get all that process done. And then I remember getting a phone call from the oncologist that I had seen and curbsided saying, we think it's benign. We don't think it's an aggressive sarcoma. That's all he had at that point. And that was great news. Maybe I am going to live, because those first couple of weeks, how many people do you know that have a 28 centimeter sarcoma that have a decent prognosis? Yeah. I met with oncology, met with radiation oncology, met with oncologic surgeon at the big cancer center in Salt Lake City, which is our nearest big urban center where they have a cancer center. And it was decided to do radiation treatments to try to shrink the blood vessels. Also, we had a very small sample of a very large tumor, and it was large enough. Imagine 28 centimeters from the retroperitoneum. It had displaced my left kidney and spleen. Everything was shoved out of the way. So from a radiation standpoint, it was best to do the radiation first while all those other structures were out of the way. And if there were other spots of cancer, more aggressive spots that hadn't been biopsied, that way the radiation had been done and the blood vessels were able to be downsized prior to the big surgery.
And then the surgery.
Yeah. So then radiation, of course, I've recommended all these treatments to other patients before, but radiation was hard. I felt pretty good, but after about 2 weeks, the fatigue was intense. Like, back to this whole trying to live my life while being a patient. The closest place to get radiation is an 1.5-hour drive from my house. So I would get up early and depart my house at 6:30. Eventually, I got some of my friends and neighbors to drive me, because I just couldn't drive. I would fall asleep because I was so fatigued. They would drive me there and would do my 20 minutes of radiation, and I'd come back, I'd be back by 10 o'clock, put my doctor clothes back on and go back to work. I was tired, but I got to take time off later to recover from this big surgery. I figured, I'm going to be tired at home. Might as well be tired at work. I was probably crazy, but that's what I did. I could stay awake in clinic, but I was mostly worried about falling asleep driving because of 3 hours of driving. My wife would tease me because all that radiation just made me feel, I don't know, just nauseated. You feel yucky. My wife told me that she thought I was eating like I was pregnant. She's like, you want disgusting, weird, yucky food. And it was true. I would never eat gas station pizza, but I would stop by, I have to have pizza right now. I would get these weird cravings during that process.
Is that a common thing in your part of the country? Because my father-in-law lives in Iowa, and there's a gas station pizza place near him. And they swear by it. Is that just something like
I don't know. It's not where I'm at. I don't usually like that stuff very much, but we would go on a drive somewhere and I would be like, hey, you got to pull over. I've got to get some food. And I would buy this horrible food that I would not normally eat. For some reason, the radiation just made my guts not happy. After completing radiation, I had to sit on it for 4 weeks to let everything recover back to feeling decently good. Then I went to the cancer center and had a big, long 5 or 6 hour surgery to remove it. It's one of those things, we're doctors, so you see all these things from the outside, but it's crazy. I think I got 5 or 6 units of blood transfused. You have this long surgery and you're telling your family it's exploratory laparotomy. At the beginning of that discussion was you'd probably lose your spleen, your left kidney, your left hemicolon, you'll have an ostomy. You have to go into it just understanding that might happen. And I don't know, maybe it's too much information, but
no, Peter, you're leaving us hanging here, and we're all doctors listening to this. We all want to know what's going on. What happened?
It was this moment. Like, I just remember as I rolled in there, and you don't know what to expect. I just had 100% trust in the surgeon that I had worked with. Interestingly, this really great surgeon, she was my surgical clerkship director when I was a medical student years before. And so I knew her from way back.
Yeah.
So I trusted her. I had sent many patients to her back and forth over the intervening years, and I just knew she would do a good job. But at the time, that morning, I just remember getting the IV and talking to the anesthesiologist and talking to the surgeon, and it was just this moment of release. Like, I will do whatever it takes, and I'm in your hands.
Yeah.
And I just have to trust that you've put thousands of hours into becoming who you are, and I just have to trust. It was really an interesting moment to just surrender all control and say, whatever happens.
That's really interesting, your perspective. Was that one of those moments that you've then carried with you going forward in your life or in your care of other patients? Has that changed you in other ways?
That moment is one of, you remember little poignant moments. That's one of them. In those few minutes, I didn't want Eva said back to the OR 1,000 times. Just take me back there and we'll visit, and then drift me off to sleep.
Yeah.
But I just remember that moment of trust. And I think it's informed me since then. I was fortunate to be able to go back and work as a doctor. As patients put their trust, they come to you with their problem. And depending from my perspective, whether it's a big problem or a little problem, for the patient, it might be everything. Yeah. And they've come in, and sometimes people are distrustful of their doctor, but a lot of times people come in and say, okay, whatever you say is what I will do. And I can recognize that feeling now. Like, You could have gone to a different doctor, a different place. They probably all would have given you good advice. But it was that time and that place. I needed to trust those doctors. And it wasn't theoretical or something on a textbook. It was me and the rest of my life and my family and my outcome. And it was a difficult, yet in hindsight, a wonderful moment in some ways.
If you like this podcast episode, you're going to love the other shows over at the Doctor Podcast Network. For instance, The Purposeful MD. Dr. Laura Sutton, who was previously a guest on this show, helps you rediscover your passion with The Purposeful MD. She guides you through overcoming burnout and finding fulfillment in your medical career. It's time to practice medicine on your terms. Subscribe and embark on a journey to a more purposeful practice with The Purposeful MD. Then what happened? I think we're all wondering. Everyone's on the edge of their seat. Peter, you're a great storyteller. You are. You're leaving us. You're giving these breadcrumbs. You're leading us in this direction, and then you trail off, and you just let us in. These are great storytelling skills.
Yeah, I want to make sure that you can reflect on it. But the thing that happened next, I woke up from anesthesia eventually after all that. My wife had been given updates, and I remember just groggily asking the recovery nurse, did they get it all? Was everything okay? Do I still have my kidneys? And the answer was yes, you still have your kidneys, and they think they got it all. But then I couldn't move my leg. That was the hardest part. They had somehow gotten into some of the nerves that are right there coming off of the spine near L4. And I could not engage my quads on my left leg, not at all. And it was very numb on that left leg. Certainly they didn't cut a nerve, but there's a whole plexus of nerves that comes off the retroperitoneum that's very close to everything. As you can imagine, I've been part of surgeries where you can't see very well and there's lots of blood. And so I'm sure they're careful as they possibly could. But the long and short of it is I had quite a nerve injury, but I did not have an ostomy and I still had all my other parts. So I was totally happy about it.
Oh, amazing. Relief. And so how are you doing now?
So what followed that was I was in the hospital for a few days, just trying to get my ileus to resolve and everything to wake back up, and started the process of physical therapy.
Students come into your room every day and asking if you've passed gas or had flatus.
Yes,
so
I do.
You're on the other side of those questions. Good morning.
I had been a medical student. I had been a medical student at the University of Utah and had been in those same halls and worn that same coat and done all the same things. I'm like, all right, it's my turn to receive this. Get the medical student and the resident and the fellow and the surgeon. Okay, yeah, I've been on the other side of this. But I was able to walk. I had to use a walker. I definitely would just collapse without that. And so that was a crazy time.
Yeah.
My nerves started to wake back up over the next few weeks, and I was able to do physical therapy, and they did a lot of muscle stimulation, trying to get those nerves to wake back up because I had just absolutely no movement at all on those quads.
Yeah.
I could make it just wiggle the slightest bit. And it took months to rehab that. And I remember they had me on one of those suspension things they basically suspend you from a bunch of bars, and you've got a seatbelt basically on and a thing that goes around the legs. Because I'm a runner. I like running. I wanted to go back and run, but I couldn't bear weight because once I got to where I would walk, that leg would collapse. But I did it again and again and again. And by June, because I was in January, by June, I could run again. And so it was a wonderful gift to be able to regain that function. I'm still numb. I'll be numb forever, but I can run. I can hike. I can do all the things.
Yeah. Oh, amazing. And then was there any more treatment required?
So they've done plenty of T scans in the following years, and I'm sure I will still have some fallout from this forever, just because it's an ongoing cancer process. And one of those things where you never really know how it's going to go. The type of tumor is called a solitary fibrous tumor. Okay. And maybe that's good to just recognize it. It's a rare type of sarcoma. It's considered ultra rare. It's 1 in a million people. So there really are very few people. They say 1 in a million, but this one literally has a rate of 1 per million people. So that means the large cancer institute where I live, the 5 million people in the surrounding states, because it's a lower population area in the Western United States, the cancer center has just a handful of patients that has this because it's 1 per million. The prognosis is so uncertain. Some people get all sorts of metastatic disease and they don't live very long, and other people are around 20 years later just doing fine. And so I remain very hopeful, but I still have to have ongoing follow-up and treatment to this day.
Which this experience has changed the way in which you interact with your patients?
I think I might have shared this with you before, Brad, but I remember laying there in those days at the hospital, recovering in those 3 or 4 days after the surgery, trying to get my function back and deciding what was life going to be like. Because I didn't know if I'd ever get to go back and work. I didn't know if I was going to just, would I survive the surgery? Would everything be okay? What was my life going to be like after that? But I remember laying there in that bed, and this is one of those moments that like another one of those moments where you remember. I remember specifically thinking after watching all these interns and residents and doctors and everybody come through, this really clear thought: if I could do it again, I would be a doctor. We can talk about the difficult parts about being a physician and the challenges and the triumphs and all that stuff. But I really remember thinking as I lay there, that kind of recovering, not knowing what comes next, thinking I would want to be a part of this team of healers. I would want to be the person who comes in that can help this person in their difficult times. And maybe it sounds cheesy or trite, but at that time when I wasn't sure what would come next or what my life would hold, like I really had that thought. I would want to be part of this team. And I wanted to just honor the people that had spent so many thousands of cumulative hours trying to learn their trade just so they could be ready to help me in that moment. It's because something I couldn't do for myself. And so I think that's informed my interactions with my patients and maybe my personal narrative, how I see myself. Like, okay, I want to be able to be there for those who are in need. It's still a hard job. It doesn't mean that the job got easier, but it has helped a little bit to shift perspective to say this ability to be a doctor, it's a gift. It really is.
A little more gratitude for being able to be in that position for people, being able to be that person for them. And so the gratitude can help you in those times when you're a busy clinic day, you're running late, you're stressed out, you're calling people back and trying to get home. But when you can circle back to that gratitude for being in that position.
I think so. The moment, because days are made up of moments. And so I try to find throughout the day moments, okay, this is a moment I made a difference for this person.
Yeah.
Or this is a moment where somebody's child was sick and I was able to figure out what was going on, or I was able to provide reassurance. Or this is a person who has a new diagnosis of cancer. That's always a surreal moment, again, because having been on the other side of it, to say, sorry, Mr. or Mrs., you have cancer, and we have to talk about that process. And I can relate with people. I usually am pretty open with people. Like I can tell you, I've done radiation. I know what this is like to go through the steps with cancer and have all the uncertainty. And I can't know all the answers, but I'll walk this walk with you. And those little moments really do buoy you up and say, okay, I dealt with the whiny, complainy, difficult patient and the insurance prior authorization and the stuff that nobody likes to deal with. But for all those, there were several moments each day where my ability to be here really helped somebody. And it wasn't anything about me. It's just I have a skill set, they had a need, and I was able to help them. And that's really a cool thing.
And it sounds like it even goes back to that moment where you relinquished control, right? The surgeon, the surgical oncologist was your person in that situation. And now you're recognizing when you are that person to your patients. I am helping my patient at this point. It might not even feel like help because previously you might not even felt that way. Like we see, I'm sure you do, you see a lot of the worried well. But then at the same time, you're lifting this burden of worry off of them and helping them realize that everything's going to be okay. And you're being that person, even if their issues aren't severe.
I try to be. I think most doctors, it's pretty common to see 80 to 100 patients a week. Lots and lots of patients, different interactions. On the physician side, most things I've seen before. I've probably seen it 1,000 times before.
Yes.
And I don't consider it necessarily boring, but I've seen it before and I know what to expect. And I've had this conversation 3 times this week, about something.
Yes.
That being said, when I think about it from the patient perspective, it's their first time. And it's the opportunity to answer a question. And while I don't have endless time, I can sit down and say, okay, I'll walk this walk with you. And it sounds like you've got more questions. Let's meet back in a couple of weeks after you do this test or after you see this specialist or whatever it may be so that we can continue that journey. Because that's how I would want someone to treat me. And I had excellent doctors all the way through. Again, back to one of the perks of being a doctor, the good guys, and I went to the good guys.
My wife always reminds me that when you go to Broadway and you're seeing a show, the actors in that show have done that show so many times. They've done it every single day and twice on Saturdays for weeks and months and sometimes years. And so while it's new to the audience, it is not new to them, but they need to make it feel like for the audience, it's new to the actors as well. They need to be excited to be in this show, even though they've said these lines countless times. And the same applies to us. Like you said, we say the same things to patients, sometimes a few times in the same day. But when we approach them, we have to make sure that we are recognizing that it's new to them and make them feel that novelty, not say just as if we're going through the motions. And it sounds like your cancer journey has helped you because you've been on the other side of the gown.
I wouldn't recommend it.
No.
I would recommend the perspective, but I would not recommend the disease.
The experience.
It creates so much uncertainty and doubt and chaos to my life, because my patients can get a new doctor, but my family can't get a new dad or my wife can't get a new husband. I guess she could, but like the personal parts of your life are irreplaceable.
I know what you mean. Yeah.
You're irreplaceable in your personal life. And so it just, I would say the experience has just changed a lot of the ways I interact with other people. And maybe I would also say, when you have something where you think you're going to die, like those first 2 weeks where I had no idea what this was, suddenly going from being a 43-year-old well person to suddenly somebody with a big 28-centimeter tumor. When you go through that, I think you realize that there's not too many things worse than dying at a young age. And so if you've already been through that, what can get worse? And there's always things that can get worse, but it makes you feel a little bit fearless.
Yeah.
Whatever it takes. I'll do whatever it takes. I'm not afraid of somebody not liking me, or I'm not afraid of saying something that I'm going to try to just be who I am. And because you only get one shot at it and you don't know how long you have in life. And so I think that experience does make you a little bit more compassionate and maybe a little bit more fearless.
So you don't sweat the small stuff anymore.
I'm still human. The small stuff we all do. But I try really hard to maintain that perspective and say, okay, I get to go to work today.
Yeah.
It's a gift.
Okay.
It's 3 a.m. and I don't really want to be here, but it's still a gift that I can go share with you.
Yeah.
But on the flip side, I'm also not afraid to say no when I say, okay, you want me to do that extra crazy thing where I don't get sleep for 48 hours, and I'm not afraid to tell you no.
Yeah. Good.
Is you have a little bit more, like the worst that could happen isn't the loss of the job, or isn't the loss of the patient. The worst thing that could happen would be the loss of one of your loved ones, or your loss of your life. And so that does inform a little bit of perspective. You can't take anything else that I've already had threatened.
Is there anything that you've learned from your experience that you're like, you know what? This is something that needs to be taught either in medical school or in residency. We're not talking about this enough. Like,
I wish I could gift everybody the perspective of having been a patient. And I don't know how you teach it, other than it'd be nice to. I remember one of the rotations at a pediatrics rotation in medical school, and they made us taste test the actual yucky medicines that we prescribed to our pediatric patients.
Smelled liquid augmentin, which I prescribe.
Horrible.
It's awful. It is just awful.
Or prednisolone, like liquid prednisolone for kids. Horrible.
Really?
Like horrible.
Oh, I give that all the time.
Or oral clindamycin is like the clindamycin solution.
Yeah.
Super yucky. I would want everybody to have this perspective of saying, okay, this is what it's like to have your blood drawn. This is what it's like to wait in the waiting room when everything's uncertain. This is what it's like to wait for 2 weeks for your result, because my doctors were excellent. But to sit and wait with uncertainty and have faith that the doctor would tell you as soon as they have the result, and isn't just leaving the result on their desk because they got busy with something else. It's a different perspective. I don't know how you would teach it in medical school other than
match. Yeah. Just tell them we're going to give you the results, but we're not going to tell you when. We're going to call you one day this week with your match day results, because that's what it's like to be a patient.
Yeah. Or like when they do community care rotations and things like that, it'd be nice to say, okay, I spent some time drawing blood with the phlebotomy crew, or I was the person answering the phone calls for the receptionist. I had to deal with that stuff, or I had to make the difficult phone call to my insurance because something wasn't covered. There's a lot of things that we could gain perspective of as a patient. We tend to focus so much on learning the science, and you're drinking from a fire hose and there's so much to get in. And most doctors get the compassion part, or they gain the patient perspective just by way of compassion and empathy. But it would be nice to have that experience a little bit and say, yeah, I've spent a couple of weeks answering phone calls. I've spent a couple of weeks running around with the paramedics. I know what it's like to work in the lab. I know what it's like
Or
to
working at the front
scan
desk
medical
and
records.
being yelled at by
Medical
patients.
records.
But you've got to work at the front desk of the doctor who tends to run behind. Then you got to be yelled at by his patients because of something that wasn't your fault.
Yeah. We all think this before we start medical school. Everybody writes a personal statement about why they're going to make a difference and why they want to do this. And we all believe it. I believe at some point, everybody that chooses to go into medical school to dedicate that many years of their life really does. They want to be that person. They want to be the doctor that can be counted on and be right there. And then somewhere in the middle, sometimes we get so lost in the process that we forget, we lose the perspective. And so it's important to reflect on what it is and why we do it. And not only why I chose medicine, but why I stay in medicine. It's not about the science. That's wonderful, but I could be probably satisfied as a scientist doing something else. It's about the science applied to the people. And it's about that individual interaction, the difference I made for that person. And I felt it so keenly, and I continue to feel it so keenly when I'm a patient. And often I'm a patient in the same day I'm a doctor. And so I can appreciate it.
Well, thank you so much for sharing, for being so vulnerable about your experience and sharing your cancer journey with us. And you said, about making a difference with patients. Speaking of which, you have a podcast called Doctors Making a Difference. So tell us about the podcast.
It was definitely inspired by all this stuff, Brad. I really had the idea of this several years ago, way before the tumor. I had this thought, it was during as COVID and that time, I thought so many of my peers are leaving medicine. The consultants I've used for the previous 10 years, you'd call them, oh, they left. Where'd they go? Oh, they decided they weren't going to work here anymore. They weren't going to do medicine anymore, or they were going to go do something else, or they became a real estate investor, or yada. And there's wonderful things you can do with your intellect and your gifts that don't have to be a doctor. If you hate it, don't be a doctor. But isn't there a way to keep doctors still loving the job? And so I had this thought well before, and I just never really put it together. And then after this tumor, and as I was contemplating what comes next, I thought, I have got to share this thought. I don't know how long I get to live. I don't know if I get to do this again, but I would want to leave medicine better than I found it. And I can't do it by myself. But if I leave little breadcrumbs along the way and show people hey, these are doctors that actually make a difference. Look what they're doing, and look at the tools or resources or things that they need to actually stay in medicine. And it's not killing yourself working 90 hours a week. It's trying to find the things that are most meaningful. And if every doctor from early on could understand that perspective and take care of themselves so they can continue to take care of others, it'd be a gift. It'd be a gift to our patients. And I think it would make people stay in medicine longer and find themselves satisfied with it rather than just getting out as soon as I can, because you don't want to feel like you're just a squirrel or hamster on a treadmill. You want to feel like you can make a difference for all your life, but you have to be able to care for yourself. And so that's really the genesis of it. And that's why I started this podcast, and I'm pretty excited. It's really fun actually to talk to people all over the country, people like yourself, Brad. I've really enjoyed it.
Yeah, the connections are amazing. So if you're interested in starting a podcast, we're members of the Doctor Podcast Network. We can help you make it happen. And because those connections, that's what I love about it. I love these conversations like that. Now, this is our second conversation. We're also interacting online because we're both part of the network. And so now we're part of each other's network, and it's great. And getting the opportunity to speak to you and hear your story, I feel like I'm a better person for it, for having learned from you. And I guess that's what you're doing on Doctors Making a Difference. You're helping us find that gratitude so that we can stay in medicine, because there's so many people, like you said, that are leaving. So find your inspiration to stay. Search the podcast search engines for Doctors Making a Difference. Dr. Peter Crane, thank you so much for your time and all you do for your patients.
Thank you so much, Brad.
Thanks for listening. I have a favor to ask. You listened to the episode until the end, which means you either fell asleep or you really liked the episode. So please share it, or like it, or comment on a social media post, or write us a 5-star review, something. It would really help me out. And maybe what you learned from this episode can help someone else too. The views expressed in this episode are those of the interviewer and interviewee, and don't represent the views of their employer or even their significant other. Even though the magic of podcasting make it sound like I'm talking directly to you. This is not a doctor-patient relationship, and this is not medical advice, or financial advice, or really any advice. Thanks again for listening to The Physician's Guide to Doctoring.